let's do the monologue. I would like to make an argument. The argument seems hyperbolic in the very beginning. You may recoil when you hear this argument, but I do think the argument is fundamentally correct. I have notes, so I will be looking down at notes periodically. And the argument boils down to there is a shadow war underneath the war that seems to be in a preluding stage, meaning a third world war. And the shadow war is based on narrative. This narrative, in one sense, of we are now a naked hegemon, meaning from the Cold War, it flipped. In the old days, you had this argument of we are love and light, we're truth and justice, we are the United States, they are a repressive regime, we have big, beautiful grocery stores, look at our bread aisles, you have 1,000 loaves of bread that you can get at any particular moment, 24 hours a day, even sometimes if you want. But look at them, look at their stores, look at their cars, look at their society, it's repressive, it's different. Now, the whole freedom, justice, love and light thing was just advertising. The reality was we're knocking over governments left and right. We still had, of course, Jim Crow's, or at the very least segregation, basically an apartheid state. But it's Hollywood, right? The veneer of it was pretty, it sparkled. And because of such, when countries made a choice, we wanted the big, beautiful grocery stores. And so many of those countries effectively sided with us in an ideological sense. Great. But this is not currently the way this is working out. Currently, you have a naked hegemon where they would come out and openly state, we have a rules-based order. We set the rules. You effectively follow the orders. And they would tell that to country after country after country, not hiding it, not hiding the ball. They would be very open about the fact that we have a rules-based order, meaning the idea of the United Nations and all of that stuff is nonsense. We don't have to follow international law. And as I've made the argument before, international law doesn't exist. If you get 20% of the world effectively flagrantly violating it in the open, then you do not have international law. That is called something else. It is the law of the jungle. There's that. The reason that I'm going to make this case, that a lot of this and what is coming out of the West from the standpoint of Western exceptionalism is effectively Nazism rebranded. I would make the case that Hitler actually did win the war. Maybe not in the context of militaristic means, because obviously he popped his dog, who didn't do anything wrong, even though he was Hitler's dog. What's her name? Killed herself, and Hitler popped himself off in the head. And yet many of the other people within the context of the Third Reich that off themselves, others hung, shot, etc. So obviously they lost the war. But ideologically, in the context of the West, it is hard to make the case that they didn't win. If you had to distill what Hitlerian points of view down into a snapshot, into a sentence, what would it be? We're German, goddammit, and we're better. We are cosmically better. We are intrinsically better. And it has nothing to do with what we do in the larger world. We are morally, culturally, socially, physically superior. And again, it has nothing to do with what we do in the real physical matter reality world. It is untethered to this physical existence. It is cosmic in the way that it effectively functions. And if you had to really think about Western imperialism or Western exceptionalism, how is it not the same? We are better, culturally superior, etc. And because of such, we have a God-given right to dictate the order and the means by which this world propagates itself. And ideally, with us being in charge. Rules-based order. We set the rules. You all, Neanderthals, you mongrels, you follow the orders. Same thing in the way that Hitler thought of the world. This is our garden. We're Germany. We're better. Those mongrels out there need to be led. And if we need to kill some off in order to make more space for us, then fair enough. That's what we need to do. What is it? Is it not very similar in the way that the West looks at the way that they operate? It seems that they've come to the conclusion that the problem with Hitler wasn't the exceptionalism part. It was A, that it wasn't just Germans, it was all of the West. B, he was too loud about it in the way that he went screaming it around, making his dramatic speeches, banging his fists and everything else. And C, that he tried to colonize Europe. That his objective should have been the takedown of the governments around the world of the mongrels that were outside of the European garden, and to function in those terms. And so the US and Europe effectively have come to the conclusion that we need to rebrand Nazism. We're going to call it Western exceptionalism. And whether we say it openly or not, that is what we're going to espouse to the world as our justification for naked hegemony. And that is exactly what they're doing, complete with committing a genocide. Because that's the other point. The values, the morality, the cultural, social exceptionalism is cosmic, it's esoteric, it's ethereal in the way that it operates. It's not tethered to the physical existence in regards to the things that you do. So if they want to commit a genocide, if they want to knock over governments, if they want to get 1.7 million people killed, if they want to propagate wars, if they want to do any of these things, if they want to knock over spaces and take resources from people, if they want to invade, if they want to blow up boats, blow up pipelines, they would do that. And in no situation, none of that besmirches their morality, their social advancement. It doesn't change what they think of themselves when they look in the mirror, untethered to all physical actions, even when they are complete, deranged, degenerate sociopaths. It doesn't affect them. They still wake up in the morning thinking to themselves, feels good to be superior. Let me go rule the world. The issue that they're having is it's slipping away. It's all slipping away. And despite the fact that the world is showing them a reflection of better countries, with their countries falling apart. Look at China, look at the high-speed rail. America can't even build high-speed rail. Look at the cities that China is building. Have you seen American cities? Look at the Russian subways. Have you seen American subways? Look at the expanding and growing economies. Look at the quality of life in those countries as compared to the US, or for that matter, even now in Europe, where apparently if you're in France, you have to wear a shirt because people keep grabbing your tits. That is not, under any measure, indicative of success. It's just not. I guess my point is this. It's kind of as if they moved from slavery to Jim Crow, but in this case, from Nazism to a lighter brand of Nazism, and used that as a prevailing ideology and a justification for the witch ruling the world. It's wild to me that this is even complete with supporting a genocide, very Nazi-ish, in a way that the Nazis would be like, wow, that's an impressive genocide you guys are running there. And it's an impressive propaganda outlets that you guys are using to justify that particular genocide that you guys are running. The starvation, hey, firmly at home with the Nazis on that one. The ethnic cleansing, or at the very least the attempted ethnic cleansing, the Russophobia. Well, again, look at what they're doing in Europe, where they're instilling Russophobia built on fundamental lies about what was taking place in Ukraine and this kind of expansion of Europe closer and closer to Russia, with the idea of toppling the Russian government so they can get their hand on the resources. Lebensraum, right? How is it all that different? And again, even to the point of burning down their own cities as they make ridiculous, ludicrous speeches that I'm not sure how many people listen to, without even the flair and dramatics of Hitler. Meaning, at the very least, he gave good speeches. These idiots, these twits, these male degenerates, less so, less interesting, with no swords to back them up in any of these speeches. Meaning, for all of the threats that they leverage, they have no capacity to fulfill any of them. And yet, they seem to be dead set, just like Hitler, on feeding their own populations to the Russians as their cities crumble. There's so many dynamics that seem to just float to one another, living off of lies, Goebbels. I don't need to see how that's all that different. It seems like they're even more effective in doing that stuff than what Hitler and many of the people in Germany was doing. It's as if they've instilled or accepted this mantra, and that they've accepted this in trying to overtake the world doing it. Look at what Trump is doing in Venezuela. Look at the attacks on Iran. Look at the overthrow of the Ukrainian government. Look at the overthrows of the governments in South America, for that matter, even the overthrow of the Iranian government at that point, right? They were able to take it back, but the United States never necessarily got over them doing it. Look at what France is doing in Africa with this notion of trying to put the kibosh on governments and countries that have decided to pull away from France. Hell, AFRICOM, and what they're doing in this region of the world, where they're, again, going after governments that they don't particularly like. Romania, Georgia, these governments that they don't necessarily like, that they're doing everything in their power to either overthrow or take power in, because those governments have decided to go a different path. How is this democracy? And in the context of other governments like China, you have Kalis, who's losing one war and contemplating the next war that she will also lose against China. This is a cancer. Whether it's Nazism in the way that they look at the world, or whether it's Western imperialism or Western exceptionalism, these things are very close to one another, both of which are cancers, and both of which are going to lead us as a world to ruin. I could be wrong. I don't think I am. There are plenty of filthy degenerates in all of these countries that seem to have decided that the world, the 14%, should come together and effectively rule the world. And the rest of the world seems to be disagreeing. And so they seem to be setting the world on fire for primacy. You don't do that unless you are in this mindset that we have some justification for it. That justification, we're culturally, socially, morally, physically superior, despite all evidence to the contrary. Yeah, I ended on that. It's a cancer. It's fucking cancer. Till we cut that shit out, I don't know how we will get to a better world. And I think I agree with Sarah on this. I think I agree with Mark on this. I think we are at a high chance for some kind of catastrophe where one of these lunatics who seem to be no longer fearful of ending the world does something that potentially ends the world. Up to this point, if you've noticed in the wars, and this is not part of the monologue, but if you've noticed, for all of the negative things that they've said about Putin, if Putin was that guy who they said he was, they would not be risking a lot of the shit that they do. If he was a different type of, as they say in rap, a different type of N-word, they wouldn't be challenging and testing in this particular way. It is purely the fact that he has been patient and he has tried to avoid direct intervention, direct kinetic action against NATO countries. Even though, as it costs his belly, they have been lobbing missiles into his country. He has every right to hit those places where those things are being developed. He has avoided doing so. These idiots have gotten more provocative because of his patience, effectively saying his patience or his reticence to start a larger world war is effectively weakness. That is limits. And at some point, whether in China, whether in Russia, those limits will be tested and we will all pay the consequences for it. All right, I'm going to end this. Oh, there are more. Welcome to the family. Trash Panda, please clip the monologue. I will clip the monologue, Trash Panda. A book, The Weimar Century, The Ideological Foundations of the Cold War, supports your idea of Germany losing the war but winning the peace. Yes, and by the way, we use fascists all over the place. When we took over Bolivia, fascists. When we're using ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the various parts of Syria, who are they, if not fascists? They may not be Nazis in the way that we call Nazis, but they, Lord knows, they are fascists. They are that ilk, these kind of hardcore neo-Nazi-ish right-wingers that we effectively use to accomplish our ends. And then you get them using Nazis literal in Ukraine in order to accomplish their objectives. I mean, for fuck's sake, is anything sacred? They just had the Victory Day parade in Moscow. You would think, considering what the world had to beat back into a box, like Pandora's box of hells, that there would be something that would be sacred, especially considering 30 million Russians died 30 million Chinese died in beating back the Nazis, or for that matter, those lunatics in Japan. And yet, not so much. Not so much. And then Japan is like, why do they keep having this parade? I don't get it. Why do they keep having this parade? Because you haven't acknowledged, even after 60, 70 years, how deranged, sociopathic, the filthy animals that you guys were. You just pass it over. And the problem is, when you have a tendency to pass stuff over, that shit can happen again because you haven't accepted the lessons of history in a way where you acknowledge we fucked up on a massive fucking level. That's what we did. We're Japan. We had comfort women, and we were claiming that those comfort women wanted the masculine Japanese soldiers that had massacred all of these millions of people. They just wanted it. They couldn't resist because we are also somehow superior. Also, we're the mighty Japanese standing at 5'3". I guess there are things that are sacred. And if you're going to lose that many people, what they say, freedom is not free, to beat back monsters, literal monsters. Look, vampires, you can say they're monsters, but there's nothing worse than human beings who take on the shape and form of monsters. Those things are real. These other ones are fictitious. If you have to beat that back, not because you wanted to, not because you got up that morning thinking that this is what I want to do, but out of pure and utter necessity, because those monsters was coming to take your life and your land, then yeah, you immortalize that in some particular fashion, in a way that humans typically do. And it should reverberate all throughout history, just so this would never happen again. This is not just a lesson for the Chinese of saying, we will not allow this to happen again. This is a lesson to the world. We would never allow that shit to happen again. Never again. Never again. Same thing is true for the Russians. Same thing is true for the Chinese. So, Japanese need to bend the knee, beg for forgiveness, apologize sincerely to whatever degree that is. As a nation, these parades will keep going on. 100 years into the future, these parades will keep going on. These celebrations will keep going on. They will keep getting across that you will never be allowed to behave and do this. He said the level of respect they have for the Soviets is not there for the Russians. Yes, that's true. It's because they knew that the Soviet leader would push the button. Yes. Yeah, it's that. It's that. They had a healthy fear that worst come to worst, the world would end. They knew it, flesh to bone, they understood it. But I think there's a slight difference also, though. I think in the case of the Soviet Union hadn't fallen, right? Like, it's one thing if you and I are on an even keel, and you know that whatever you think about me, I can end it all for both of us. You get it, I get it. What happens when I fall off that keel? Like, what happens when I fall off the horse? When I've damaged myself, I've been in the hospital, you've fed me Jell-O, you've seen me in my underwear as I've tried to get back into the bed and stumbled, fell, and dragged myself back into the bed. Is your level of respect for me still there? Now, I'm not talking about your dad that's dying or something like that. I'm talking about an enemy that you've seen falter in a massive effing way. The worst geopolitical disaster of our time. You've seen it. You've watched it. You've seen them fundamentally, utterly collapse. You've seen somebody like Trump running the country. I'm sorry, Boris Yeltsin, drunkard, running the country. You've seen that. You've experienced that. And you think Putin, VP, is going to be that same guy. And he's not that same guy. And he pulls the energies of Russia, cobbles them back together. They have a military tradition, cobbles it back together. Beat back the oligarchs. Oh, you don't like the new regime? Okay, well, let's go over here and talk about it. Anybody else? Anybody else? Todd, you good? Ba, mit, si, si. They don't speak Russian, just speaking Spanish after that. Meaning you have dealt with the shit that you needed to deal with to cobble back the strength and the power of your country and turn it into a great power. But they remember you in your underwear. They saw the red underwear. They saw your ass hanging out. I hope I'm being, cavalier in the way that I'm talking about this, but I'm trying to make the point of many of these nations saw a weakened Russia. And it's almost like the fall of the Soviet Union in and of itself, in their minds, gave them license to look at it as lesser. And as it is lesser, we can test it. It's kind of like going to a prison and there's a guy in prison and you keep testing that guy, not realizing that that guy will beat your ass and put a knife in you while you sleep. And then after you see him do it once or twice, it becomes that. What you're seeing in Ukraine is them testing Russia, and Russia putting a knife in their throats, and them not knowing how to deal with the reality that their world has fundamentally just changed, not just in a physical matter sense, but in a spiritual sense. This is them coming to grips with it. And in them coming to grips with it, you have Europe who are talking a lot of smack because they don't necessarily believe that Putin is going to attack them. So they talk a lot of smack. They don't want the war to end in Ukraine because they don't necessarily want to accept the loss. There's that. But also, they don't give a shit about Ukraine. So they would let every last Ukrainian effectively die on that battlefield if it staves off by one more day the humiliation that is going to take place when it becomes perfectly clear to the entirety of the world that an organization that has spent the entirety of its existence supposedly going against the Soviet Union and all of these other nations put together, like 50, 60, how many other nations put together, and its spiritual successor, Russia, beat them all. That is a hell of a pill to swallow. And it brings into question, what is even the purpose of NATO? Right? What's the point? You couldn't even beat, this one country. How are you going to beat all of them? It's that. This is the world coming to grips, the Western world, that they're not the top dog. This is the Europeans coming to grips with the fact that all of these colonies that, were masters of the world at one point are worthless, pointless, failing economies, are not even part of the tech sector, not even part of the burgeoning economy, not even part of the industrial sector, and for all intents and purposes can be overlooked in any negotiations. And what the architecture of Europe will be at the end of this war will be decided by Russia and the United States. Europe will be informed. That's humiliating for Europe. But they chose this. They locked their side. They're fading with the US. Sucks for you. Sucks for you. In this particular case, Russia has risen. A military power that has always been a military power, that has always been a forceful military power, has recoupled its forces back together. It did so because it had to. They kept effing with it, pushing it. Well, there it is. You got what you wanted. Congratulations. A military of 150,000 at one point is now swelled to nearly 1 million with the best army on the planet Earth. And yes, I'm including the US military on that. So, at least in the type of warfare they fight, it's not like they're going to the US to fight. If the US wants to come to Russia, I guess you could do that. I guess you could do that. It's not like the country's going